Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I am the Diggly Dude, Dr. Papatoe Panther, Mr. Slippers, here to drop a little rugby league episode of the Niche Cast ahead of round 25 in the NRL. This is the last round of the regular season before we move into finals footy, and what that means is that this is the first week of finals footy in the respective reserve grade competitions. So up in Queensland and in New South Wales, the Warriors reserve grade team is not in finals footy by the looks of it, and I'll just double check to make sure that the Jersey Flegg team are not in finals footy either. No, the Jersey Flegg Warriors finished 10th, and the Canterbury Cup reserve grade Warriors, they finished 9th, just outside finals footy and reserve grade. So that is reflective of where the Warriors are sitting at the moment. But there's plenty of Kiwi NRL funk in the NRL and in reserve grade competitions as well that I'm going to discuss today. So much less Warriors. Who cares about the Warriors? We're here for the greater good of rugby league in Aotearoa and to highlight some interesting Kiwi NRL players doing things in the NRL and the respective reserve grade competitions as well. Before we jump into that though, I recommend that you go to playersvoice.com.au and read about, well, they got a couple of interesting ones recently. Manu Ma'u, Parramatta forward, off to the Super League at the end of this season. He wrote a little yarn for Players Voice, so he tells his story, which is given his background, going to prison, being involved in gangs and stuff in Auckland, and then emerging out the other side to come and play NRL footy is rather amazing. So read his story on playersvoice.com.au, and if you do head to Players Voice, you'll find that Dan Hooker, Kiwi UFC fighter Dan Hooker, has also spun a little yarn there as well. So just a couple of interesting little yarns to go check out if you are bored. Rightio, we'll just crack straight into some Kiwi NRL team lists, because there's plenty of little gems to discuss this week. So Roosters versus Rabbitohs is tonight, Thursday evening, and there have been a couple of changes to the Roosters squad to include Sitili Tupunuia and Poasa Fa'amasili on the extended bench. So they weren't initially named, but they've just been called in, with Mitchell Orbison being ruled out, I think. Yeah, Brett Morris and Mitchell Orbison dropped, rested probably, given that there's a lot of teams resting players in this last week. And so that means Sitili Tupunuia comes onto the bench, and then Poasa Fa'amasili comes into the extended bench. Neither of them were actually named in the top 17 for the Roosters for this game, and did end up being named for the North Sydney Bears, the Roosters reserve grade team, but I doubt that Tupunuia especially will back up and play reserve grade as well, whereas Poasa Fa'amasili, if he doesn't play for the Roosters and he's on that extended bench, he'll probably lace up for the Bears in their game this weekend. Joseph Manu's still at centre for the Roosters, and then you've got Jarawada Hargraves starting at prop alongside Isaac Liu, and then you've got Zane Teravano and Tupunuia on the bench for the Roosters. No Siosua Tokiaho, he is out injured this week, and that's hopefully he can come back for the finals, and if he does, I still imagine he will play coming off the bench for the Roosters. That's my gut feel at the moment, if he does make a return, because Isaac Liu has done a fantastic job starting at prop for the Roosters. Isaac Liu dabbled in a bit of edge forward last season for the Roosters. He played Kiwis last season as an edge forward, and then this season he's gone back to the middle where he started out with the Roosters. Started some games at lock, started some games at prop, came off the bench, and now he's settled into starting at prop with Siosua Tokiaho out, and then in recent weeks Tokiaho has come off the bench And in terms of impact off the bench, I think Tokiaho is better suited to that role than Isaac Liu. So if Trent Robinson, Roosters coach Trent Robinson, does like Isaac Liu starting at prop, I think you get plenty of value in playing Tokiaho off the bench if and when he is available. Roosters also have Tom Amone coming onto their bench. He was born in Auckland, I believe, so it'll just be interesting to see where his representative future does lie if he does crack representative footy. He's on the bench for the Rabbitohs. And then Mawane Hiroti, the outside back centre winger, he's on the extended bench for the Roosters. Eels versus Seagulls this week, we have still Dylan Brown in the halves, and he's got to step up to help Mitchell Moses for the Eels. In recent weeks, he hasn't quite contributed in terms of tackle busts and the dynamic running that we have come to expect from Dylan Brown. So he really needs to add to the Eels' attack to help make Mitchell Moses' life a bit easier, and with that pressure taken off of Moses, I think the Eels are a far better team, not only because of the threat that Brown offers himself, but in terms of easing the workload and responsibility on Mitchell Moses. Manu Ma'un's starting on the edge for the Eels. Marata Niokore is still starting in the middle of the field for the Eels. Then you've got Brad Takarangi on a bench, and extended bench for the Eels, you've got Penny Terapo and Josh Hoffman. Seagulls have Mari Tapau starting at prop, and then you've also got Tanyala Paseka, another Auckland-born player, coming off the bench for the Seagulls. This game, I'm definitely most interested in Dylan Brown and the effect that he can have on this game, considering that he's coming up against the Seagulls team, and the Seagulls team will be well prepared to handle Dylan Brown. They're going to put a lot of pressure on those halves. Especially the likes of Curtis Sirenen defending out on the edges. Corey Waddell's another eager, aggressive player. So I'm just interested in what they do to put Dylan Brown under pressure. And then it's a bit of a gauge game for Dylan Brown in assessing what he can offer as the intensity of these games increases. Dylan Brown's still a rookie, still in his first season of NRL footy. He's also playing to be in contention for the Kiwis, so going to have a sharp focus on Dylan Brown in the halves for the Eels this week. And then also another young Kiwi NRL player, Marata Niokore, someone who could be in Kiwis contention, but he's in the middle for the Eels this week against the famed Sea Eagles middle, Whenua Blake, Marty Tapau, Jake Trbojevic. These dudes give the Eagles plenty of roll forward down the middle, but perhaps the Eels saw how Melbourne Storm shifted the footy and nullified the effect of those Seagulls middles and just kept building pressure, forced them to do a lot of defensive work, but then with the footy, they just kept moving those middle forwards around just to get them under fatigue a little bit. But in terms of like a physical battle in the middle, Marata Niokore is in for a interesting test, given that he is primarily a middle edge forward, but he has done a very good job in the middle, and then you're coming up against one of the best middle groups in the NRL, and what is Marata Niokore going to be up to in that game? Storm versus Cowboys. Storm still have Jerome Hughes in the halves, which is good to see. They have Jesse Bromwich, Nelson Asafa-Solomona, and Kenny Bromwich in their forward pack. No Brandon Smith. He has been rested, I believe, for this game. Brandon Smith, I think the stat that I found was that he's played 20 games this season and averaged 42 minutes as a middle forward, which is astronomical for someone with the size and stature of Brandon Smith, so it's a well-deserved rest for Brandon Smith with the Melbourne Storm. Cowboys have Jordan Kahu at centre. They have Jason Taumalolo starting in the middle, and then you got Peter Holler coming off the bench. So there's plenty of matchups here that are going to be intriguing. Primarily the battle of the forwards, Asafa-Solomona, Jesse Bromwich, even Dale Finucane, and how they are going to stop Jason Taumalolo. And then Jordan McLean is coming up against his former team, the Storm. So that battle in the middle of the field here is going to be very interesting. In terms of like how the Storm slow down and stop Taumalolo, but then just the energy that Asafa Solomona is going to play with and the subtlety of Jesse Bromwich's game, because the Storm, they tend to rampage through the middle and then spread wide to make the most of that space out wide, as opposed to last week where they pushed wider early against the Seagulls to stretch them out through the middle. I'm interested to see what Jesse Bromwich and Asafa Solomona especially can do against this Cowboys forward pack. The Cowboys forwards have been fairly lackluster all season long, and they could be there for the taking if the Storm are in a certain mood with regards to Jesse Bromwich and Asafa Solomona. And also, Jerome Hughes is coming up against his former club. He did play footy with the Cowboys earlier in his career, so he will probably want to put on a show. You're going to have Jerome Hughes and Brodie Croft playing. Cameron Munster's not playing. So usually it's either been Brodie Croft or Jerome Hughes playing alongside Cameron Munster. That means that Cameron Munster's on the left and then Jerome Hughes or Brodie Croft is on the right. Now we've got Brodie Croft and Jerome Hughes. So one of them is going to have to play on the left. One of them is going to have to play on the right. My guess, I've only really seen Brodie Croft play on the right, but I assume that just for cohesion for finals footy, Brodie Croft will just take Cameron Munster's job on the left, and then Jerome Hughes can continue to build those combinations on the right edge for the Melbourne Storm. Raiders versus Warriors. Raiders have Bailey Simonson starting at fullback. They have Saliva Havili coming off the bench. And then you've got Joseph Tapine named on an extended bench alongside Jordan Rapana. So the Ricky Stewart, the Raiders coach, he has rested Shans Nickel-Klokstad, Jordan Rapana, and Iosio Soliola. Interesting thing here is that it offers an opportunity for Bailey Simonson to start at fullback and see what he can do at fullback. Bailey Simonson's like, everyone has talked about Shans Nickel-Klokstad, and obviously he's given the Raiders, buy of the season kind of qualities. He's great value for money. Bailey Simonson, I believe, arrived at the Raiders on a train and trial contract this off-season. And now he's played a lot of footy this year due to injuries and suspension, but if the Raiders are full strength, Bailey Simonson, recent weeks they've been at full strength in their backline before Joey Leilua got suspended. So Bailey Simonson actually took up the bench utility spot, bumping Saliva Havili off the Raiders bench. Now Bailey Simonson gets a chance to start at fullback, and that's a fantastic opportunity for Bailey Simonson because he has looked dynamic and robust. Nimble footwork, but powerful, breaks tackles. He's cut from that same cloth as Jordan Rapana and Nick Kotrick in the sense that he busts tackles. Now he starts at fullback, and that is even more interesting when you consider that Bailey Simonson played sevens rugby for New Zealand. He was born and raised in Australia, played sevens rugby for New Zealand, and he could, if he decides to be eligible for the Kiwis, he could be someone to keep an eye on in that kind of Remus Smith bracket as interesting outside back prospects. The Kiwis have plenty of depth across all positions, so it's unlikely he'll start for the Kiwis anytime soon. However, he could be in the wider squad type of mix if he can, put in some great performances to round out the season. Warriors, Hookers. Bulldogs versus Broncos. Now, things get even funkier with the Bulldogs because we have a debut for Morgan Harper. Morgan Harper is from Aotearoa. He was signed to the Bulldogs but during a time when he was playing men's footy for Aotearoa. He was playing men's footy for Waikato, and then after pretty much leaving school, I believe, he went and joined the Bulldogs. They scouted him, they recruited him, and he's been playing in reserve grade primarily recently. He won the reserve grade competition with the Bulldogs last season. He was selected in the New South Wales Residents this season. Last season, he also started at centre for the Junior Kiwis. And he's a very, very, very good prospect coming through. And he starts at centre for the Bulldogs. That's notable because the other centre for the Bulldogs this week is Remus Smith, who has been playing on the wing. He had a bit of a suspension. Now he's come back and he's starting at centre. Now, it's going to be very difficult to tell Harper and Smith apart because they are very similar in terms of body shape, stature, and how they operate, which is fantastic to have them both starting at centre. And I think they've got an interesting matchup this week because you got the Broncos. So one of them is going to be marking up against Katoni Staggs, who is extremely powerful and dynamic. The other is going to be lining up against Alex Glenn, who is a forward playing centre. So those are going to be tricky defensive tasks for Remus Smith and Morgan Harper. But if they can do a good job against those two centres, I think it's going to put the Bulldogs in a good position to possibly upset the Broncos in their last game of the season. And when I go to those reserve grade team lists, I'll extrapolate on an interesting Junior Kiwis note as well. But yes, Remus Smith starting at centre for the Bulldogs is interesting. Even more interesting is having Morgan Harper from Ngaruawahia finally making his Kiwi NRL debut. Jeremy Marshall-King is starting at hooker for the Bulldogs. Corey Harawira-Naera is starting on an edge for the Bulldogs. Then on the bench you've got Renouf Tu'umanga, Raymond Faitala-Mariner. Extended bench, you got Fa'amanu Brown and Offa Hickey Ogden. Once again, watch out for Renouf Tu'umanga, being very powerful. And that power off the bench in terms of Tu'umanga, Raymond Faitala-Mariner, coming up against this Brisbane Broncos forward pack that has been celebrated to no end. That could be an interesting marker for those young Bulldogs forwards. Broncos only have Alex Glenn and Jermaine Sako, so whatever. Titans versus Dragons. Titans have Jesse Arthurs, Kevin Proctor, and yeah, nothing really else to add to those squads team lists. No Moeaki Fotuaika in that game. He's out injured at the moment, I believe. Sunday afternoon, we got West Tigers versus Cronulla Sharks. And, plenty to talk about here. Throughout the week, one of the NRL rumour hounds reported that Eason Masters is a bit unhappy at the West Tigers having to play left centre and he's not getting too much ball. Now, Eason Masters came out and disputed this, which was cool. But this was somewhat interesting because Eason Masters has had a bit of a dip in his work this season. After primarily playing right centre last year for the Tigers, now he's playing left centre, and he's playing left centre under Kiwis coach Michael Maguire. So Michael Maguire is Kiwis coach, and he is the West Tigers coach. So any kind of news or stories about Eason Masters being unhappy at the Tigers is weird, considering that he is playing under his Kiwis coach, and Eason Masters has only really, he made his debut with Michael Maguire as coach, so he's only known Michael Maguire as his Kiwis coach. So when it's being reported that Eason Masters is unhappy, it doesn't make much sense. And that's why Eason Masters came out on Twitter to basically question whatever these dudes are up to, making up their stories. For the Kiwis, you got to remember Joseph Manu plays right centre and Eason Masters plays left centre. So Eason Masters is playing left centre for the Tigers under Kiwis coach Michael Maguire, and he plays left centre for the Kiwis under Kiwis coach Michael Maguire. So just remember that in all this kerfuffle. Benji Marshall's in the halves, and then you've got Elijah Taylor and Michael Cheekham coming off the bench for the Tigers. Sharks have Sasai Feki starting on a wing, Sean Johnson in the halves. Now, Sean Johnson versus Benji Marshall, these two teams are competing for a final spot. They are competing to snap up 8th spot on the NRL ladder. Huge game at Leichhardt Oval. Everyone's going to be fizzing. This game could boil down to Benji Marshall versus Sean Johnson. I don't need to say much more than that. You got Benji Marshall, the crafty veteran, who is playing as good now as he ever has in his career, and Sean Johnson in his first season with the Cronulla Sharks. Those two dudes are going to have to lead their respective teams in a high pressure game. Very excited to see which one of those dudes can have a greater influence on this game. Britton Nakora is starting on the edge for the Sharks, and then Braden Hamlin-Uele is coming off the bench. Having Braden Hamlin-Uele coming off the bench, he's probably going to average around 10 metres per run, in conjunction with Andrew Fafita, who's now coming off the bench for the Sharks. That's an advantage for the Sharks. The Tigers' bench is a lot smaller. They are a bit more mobile, a bit more dynamic, but the power and size and oomph of the Sharks bench is something to watch out for there, especially in terms of Braden Hamlin-Uele, a young Kiwi NRL forward who has been playing the house down for the Sharks this season. I would suggest he's been better than Britton Nakora throughout the course of this whole season. Panthers versus Knights. Panthers have Dean Whare starting at centre, Moses Leoto starting at prop, James Fisher-Harris in the middle, and then Jerome Luai coming off the bench. Knights, they have Sean Kenny-Dow on a wing, Mason Leno in the halves, Herman Ese coming off the bench, and then the Knights have Jura Momosea and Stafford Toa on their extended bench. I don't expect them to actually get any game time. They are just named on extended benches, but they are two intriguing Kiwi NRL prospects with the Newcastle Knights, who have battled away all season. Star Toa has been injured and hasn't played a whole lot of footy, but Jera Momosea has been a consistent presence in their reserve grade team and has been on the extended benches a fair bit for the Knights this season. They are also both St. Paul's products. So hopefully, as the Knights move forward, we might see them make their debuts for the Newcastle Knights. Okay. There wasn't too much Kiwi NRL funk in the Queensland Intrust Super Cup team of the week. However, if we go to the New South Wales team of the week, Stephen Masters is named at centre. He is a Dragons product who is off to the Rabbitohs, and this is his first team of the week selection in the Canterbury Cup. Last year, the Junior Kiwis backline was Hayes Perham at fullback, Stephen Masters on a wing, Morgan Harper at centre, Jackson Ferris at centre, and Mawane Hiroti on the other wing. So Perham and Harper and Hiroti have all played NRL footy. Harper's making his debut this week. Stephen Masters, team of the week selection this week. And then I'll get to Jackson Ferris. He's a interesting prospect with the Cronulla Sharks out of Palmerston North. But that just shows you the quality in that Junior Kiwis backline. They got torched by the Junior Kangaroos last year, but there's a whole lot of players in that Junior Kiwis team who are sniffing around NRL footy. But yeah, Stephen Masters, interesting prospect. Tane Milne was also at centre for the New South Wales Canterbury Cup Team of the Week, playing for the Warriors, his 4th Team of the Week selection of the year. Not sure why Tane Milne hasn't come around to come close to playing NRL footy for the Warriors, but who cares? And then the other one, on the wing for the Canterbury Cup Team of the Week, you've got Asu Kipaoa, who I've talked about as a Roosters up-and-comer. He should, if he's still eligible, he should feature for the Junior Kiwis this year on the wing, because he's made some serious inroads with the Roosters and has been on the fringes of NRL footy for pretty much all season. Buntia Foa, starting prop for the Canterbury Cup Team of the Week. And then you have Ofahiki Ogden, 3rd Team of the Week selection for Ogden. I'd love to see him playing more NRL footy, but at this stage he's been overtaken by Renouf Tu'uamanga and Raymond Faitala-Mariner as part of the Bulldogs bench. Okay, reserve grade finals, Canterbury Cup. You got the Panthers versus the Wentworthville Magpies. Panthers have... I'm just going to talk through interesting players, not necessarily every single Kiwi NRL player playing reserve grade, just interesting guys. Interestingly, for the Panthers, you have Dean Blore. Dean Blore is someone to keep an eye on moving forward because he was named in the halves for the Junior Kiwis last year in that same team that I've talked about. And he has been playing in the halves for the Panthers reserve grade team, but he drops back to the bench this week. Now, Dean Blore, his brother is Sean Blore, and Sean Blore was part of the Junior Kangaroos squad last year. So, bit of a split in the Blore whānau, but Dean Blore is a enticing halves prospect coming through with the Panthers, who has aligned himself with the Kiwis, and hopefully we can see him crack some NRL footy moving forward, just to add to that halves depth that we have. Wentworthville are aligned to the Parramatta Eels, so you got Greg Leolesio on the wing. Matt McKilrick, Christchurch's finest, he's starting at hooker. Couple more players, as I said, but those are just the interesting ones. Mounties versus Newtown Jets. Now, this is where things get funky. Ruben Rennie used to play for the Newtown Jets, has been a steady, consistent Kiwi NRL reserve grade player at centre, and he may face off against Jackson Ferris, who, as I alluded to earlier, played for the Junior Kiwis last year out of Palmerston North and has been playing all season long with the Newtown Jets as the reserve grade team of the Cronulla Sharks. So that's a very interesting matchup in reserve grade. Ruben Rennie versus Jackson Ferris. Then we go to the Dragons Bulldogs. Dragons have Stephen Masters at centre, and then that's it for the Dragons. They're just some Kiwi NRL haters. Bulldogs, they got a bunch of different players, but I'm always interested in Connolly Lemelu, who was signed by the Tigers. He was signed to go to Kebra Park, and then he went through the Tigers system. I pay close attention to Connolly Lemelu because he was playing with Papatoetoe Rugby Union, I believe, before he got scouted to go to Kebra Park. So he's got that Papatoetoe connection, so I keep a close eye on Connolly Lemelu. He's played fullback, he's played wing, he's played centre for the Bulldogs, and looks to be a up-and-coming player with the Bulldogs, having left the Tigers for the Bulldogs this season. Ofahiki Ogden starting at prop for the Bulldogs. Then you go Rabbitohs versus North Sydney Bears. Mawane Hiroti, the aforementioned Mawane Hiroti as the Junior Kiwis full winger last year. He's at centre. And then Jackson Paulo, he is starting on the wing for the North Sydney Bears, Rabbitohs team. Jackson Paulo this season left the Gold Coast Titans to join the South Sydney Rabbitohs. He's played New Zealand under-18s footy. He's been part of wider Junior Kiwis squad, so he's someone to watch out for with the Rabbitohs. And then the North Sydney Bears, they have Asu Kipa'oa starting on the wing this week. Pawasa Fa'amasili has been named to start at prop. I doubt we're going to see Tuponuia playing on an edge for the Bears. I doubt we'll see him play at all. He's playing NRL footy, so just watch out for that one. Okay, we'll move up to Queensland, where Tweed Head Seagulls are facing the Redcliffe Dolphins. Tweed Head Seagulls have Lee Turner starting on a wing. Lee Turner is the brother of Paul Turner, who I think won the Sunny Fi medal for the Warriors this year. Let me just double check. Paul Turner won the Sunny Fi medal as the best Jersey flag player. Paul Turner played a lot of footy in reserve grade this year, and thus he was judged the best under-20s player at the Warriors. His brother is Lee Turner, and he is starting on the wing for the Tweed Head Seagulls. Has played centre for the Tweed Heads. Now he's playing on the wing in this finals game. Tweed Heads also have John Pallavi, Warriors Junior, starting at prop. They also have Lamar Leoleva'e Vave, who has played Junior Kiwis before. John Pallavi actually spent time training with the Gold Coast Titans over last summer. Didn't quite make the final cut, but I don't see why. He should get further opportunities with the Gold Coast Titans, assuming he's playing good footy up in Queensland. Then we go to North Devils versus East Tigers. Now, this one is all about Jordan Riki versus Kalma Tuolangi. Jordan Riki, who I wrote about in conjunction with Rory Ferguson. Jordan Riki's from Christchurch. He was signed by the Brisbane Broncos, and he has been playing all season long with the North Devils club. He did play under-20s footy before, earlier in the season. Now he's moved up to reserve grade, and he's starting on an edge this week. He came off the bench for the Junior Kiwis last year. Now he's coming off the bench, starting on an edge for North Devils, and he comes up against Kalma Tuolangi, who is with the Melbourne Storm, and he is starting on an edge for East Tigers, who are aligned to the Melbourne Storm. Kalma Tuolangi started as a middle forward for the Junior Kiwis last year. Plenty of Junior Kiwis doing their thing in reserve grade and or the NRL from last year. Solomone Kata has also been named to start at centre for the East Tigers, which is, as I predicted when Solomone Kata signed with the Melbourne Storm. I doubt Solomone Kata is going to play a whole lot of footy for the Melbourne Storm, but he is playing for East Tigers. And also, interestingly, Albert Vete has been named on an extended bench for the East Tigers. Now, he could come into the East Tigers team and play in this game, obviously, but as someone who's trying to still stay relevant in the NRL with the Melbourne Storm, Albert Vete is now on an extended bench outside the top 17 for East Tigers reserve grade team. Just an interesting little note there. Wynnum Manly Seagulls versus Burleigh Bears. Not much doing for Wynnum Manly Seagulls. And then Burleigh Bears do have someone like Curtis Rowe starting at fullback. He made a debut with the Tigers, I believe, a couple of years ago, and is now playing with Burleigh Bears up in Queensland. The other game here is Sunshine Coast Falcons, who don't have anyone notable, versus Townsville Blackhawks, who I believe the Townsville Blackhawks have a bunch of players from Canterbury. Now, I believe I know this because I frequent the Canterbury Rugby League website. You can go check that out. Just Google Canterbury Rugby League. Canterbury as in Christchurch. They do a thing called their Red and Black Report, which follows all the players from Canterbury who are playing Jersey Flag, Reserve Grade, or NRL. And so they highlight all the players from Canterbury doing their thing. And Townsville Blackhawks have a player named Dejan Asi, who is starting at centre this week. He is from Christchurch. And the most recent Red and Black report out of Canterbury Rugby League says that, so this was during the week for last weekend, I believe. Let me just double check when this was published. September 2nd. So earlier this week for last weekend. So last weekend, versatile back Dejan Asi made his second ISC appearance, Intrust Super Cup appearance off the bench for Townsville Blackhawks. 40 minutes of game time, 4 runs for 41 metres, 10 metres per run. So that was his second appearance, and now he is starting at centre in a finals game. So big it up for Canterbury Rugby League's product, Dejan Asi. Other than that, the Townsville Blackhawks don't really have anyone. So that's a full Kiwi NRL wrap for the last weekend of NRL footy, and a full reserve grade finals wrap up this week as well. The big story this week is celebrating the debut for Morgan Harper from Ngaruawahia. And then I tweeted this, just some young names to watch out for sniffing around the NRL. Morgan Harper, Remus Smith, Renouf Tuamanga, Peter Holla, Satili Tupunuia, Poasa Fa'amasili, Dylan Brown, Marata Niokore, Braden Hamlin Uele, Gerard Momosia, and Stafford Toa. These are names that Kiwi NRL fans should remember as exciting prospects to celebrate in 2019. They've either played NRL footy or they could be playing NRL footy fairly soon. So keep an eye on those names and listen to all the beautiful Niche Cast podcasts. Got our latest Patreon podcast coming up that we're releasing for everyone, so check that out. And then hopefully you will support us on Patreon. If you do like the Niche Cast, if you do like what the Niche Cast is doing and want to help us continue serving up this beautiful content, jump on Patreon. That's the best way to support us. Otherwise, your ears are good enough. Likes, comments, reviews, ratings, and all that shit is good enough as well. So stay beautiful, help each other, be nice to each other, be generous, be thankful that we're living in a beautiful country like Aotearoa. And I'll see you after this weekend's footy for more Kiwi NRL Rugby League stuff. Cheers.